Neverness to Everness is an open world gacha game, and while most people are collecting characters and fighting enemies, I had a more important question. Take a look at this. If you've played the game, I bet you've never noticed all these power lines. I mean, look at all these wires. Sure, they connect to other poles, but what if we kept following them? If I map these poles out, where do they eventually lead to? This video idea was inspired by Annie Austin, who checked whether the power lines in Rockstar games connected to anything. So, how does the city of Hethereau compare to those games almost a decade later? And most importantly, is there something in the map that produces all this power? I decided to start at our home and workplace Avon, and followed the first utility pole I could find, and what I noticed immediately is, this thing is actually pretty detailed. You have this black and yellow stripe part at the bottom that serves as an electrical warning, and near the top is this electrical box and trash can looking thing above it, and then we get to the wires. I want to point out something interesting real quick with this stripe part. A few countries have a similar design, such as Taiwan and South Korea. Funnily enough, while it looks close, it doesn't exactly match either country. Taiwan's stripes go all the way down to the pole, and South Korea's stripes are much shorter, so this design doesn't exactly match any existing pattern. I thought that this could be a way for the developers to further push the fact that this game takes place in a fictional world, or you know, I'm reading too much into it, and they just picked whatever looks convincing enough. I don't know what the standard for detail is when it comes to something like this, but I was already impressed. Maybe if you're also seeing one of these up close for the first time like I am, you are too. As for these things, we'll get back to them later. For now, I'm curious where this line leads to. And if you're wondering how I'm flying in the air, I'm using the drone feature in the camera mode. Turning the corner, I'm surprised at the amount of these things there are. I mean, here's like 5 utility poles in this small area alone, with more in the background. And it's at this point where I think we're really gonna see something promising. However, we immediately have a problem. We're out of wire to follow. The line splits at this intersection, but both quickly go into dead ends, despite the fact that this place has a lot of other poles. Alright, that's not a problem. I can still turn around and go the other direction. Following this way, I noticed that this utility pole is connected to a building. I believe this is called a service drop, the wires going from the utility pole to the building. I think this is how the pole sends power, and then it just connects to another part of this building close by. I don't know if there's a reason for that. Now is when I should give a disclaimer that I am not an electrician, and didn't know most of this stuff before making this video. It really is cool how much you can learn on Google, so if I say something wrong, leave a comment saying how wrong I am. Also, side note, I want to highlight this wall of electrical stuff I saw on another building. I don't exactly know what most of this stuff is here, but I want to show my appreciation for the details, even if this stuff possibly makes no sense. I continue following this power line path, and while it looked promising at first, it also ended up in a dead end. And I didn't realize until seeing this, but looking back at the area I checked earlier, none of the power lines connected to any buildings. In fact, power lines connecting to buildings is pretty rare. Out of every building you can see here, only a couple plus the dormitory behind Avon are connected. How about we just follow the road here? I'm sure we can find something that goes further if... oh, that looks very wrong. So we're back to square one. And while this area wasn't what I was hoping to see, there's a whole lot of power lines left on the map for me to check. I'm gonna take my luck elsewhere to see if I can find anything different. And if you're interested, here's what the utility pole map looks like for this area. And hey, real quick, if you're enjoying the video, consider subscribing. I've got more video ideas like this in the future, so if you're interested, consider sticking around. I decided to check this part of the map for any other power lines, and it resulted in the same thing of a closed loop that doesn't connect to anything. So I changed up where to look and went a little closer to the central part of the city, and found some utility poles following the street. And while I thought that maybe these would actually take me somewhere, it also just abruptly ends. So unfortunately, it's likely that every power line doesn't connect to something different, which honestly makes sense. If we needed an overhead wire for every building we want to connect, there'd be wires all over the place. If you go to the central part of the city in the game, or most modern cities in real life for that matter, you'll probably notice that there are almost no utility poles. So how are these buildings getting power? Well, something like this can explain it. You've probably seen one of these in real life, and it probably looks closer to something like this. But before I get into that, let me quickly explain how these utility poles actually work, because it'll help make this make sense. Starting from the top, we have the primary wires. These carry a large amount of voltage, more than anything a house or building would normally need, which is why they're connected to these transformers. These transformers take the voltage from the primary wires and convert it to a much lower voltage for home and business usage. Got that? Now back to this thing. Here's a pad mounted transformer. Remember the transformer on the utility pole like 5 seconds ago? It's it's basically the same thing. The difference is that these connect to underground cables. So the existence of these implies underground cables, explaining how all of these buildings are powered. Well, I guess the lack of power lines everywhere also implies that. And I would love to tell you that when you run over a utility pole, you could see sparks fly, confirming the underground cables like in GTA, but they don't do that. And maybe all of this was obvious to you, but I didn't know that and thought it'd be cool to share. However, even after all of this, there's just one small problem. I can't exactly follow underground cables, so I need to take a completely different approach to see if I can even find a visible wire connection going underground. Now is probably a good time to tell you exactly what I'm looking for. As you can probably guess, these utility poles are the last step in getting power to buildings. For the sake of trying something else, let's go all the way to the beginning of the process, starting with the power generation. So step 1, obviously we need something that produces the city's power, like a power plant or something. We take this power and put it through a transformer. Remember one of these? Well, this time it's actually increasing the voltage. Why? Because we're taking it to these. Step 2, transmission towers. These are basically the highway for getting power from one place to another. And we had to increase it because energy is lost when traveling through the long wires or something. Yeah, I don't really know how it works. Must be like an infinite power glitch or something. These transmission towers connect to step 3, a substation. These things take that high voltage from the towers and lower it for the utility poles. And we lower it because these things don't have to travel as far, and it's probably a safety thing. Alright, so why did I explain all of that? Well, look here, transmission towers. These towers are only around the edge of the map. They basically serve as an indicator of where the limit of the map is. This is pretty much our last hope to actually see some kind of visible power connection. So if I follow these, theoretically I'm bound to either find a power source or a substation. And so I followed them, and followed them some more. Using the drone I followed them for a while, and I even noticed some transmission towers outside of the map. Unfortunately, nothing else connects to these. No substations, no power plant, no nothing. And unlike the utility poles, I can't even give some explanation that the tower wire goes underground. They're just there doing nothing. As for power sources, while searching I did find a few solar panels. There's this field of them, and then a few roofs of buildings have some. So I guess to answer the initial question of can I find something that produces the city's power, I guess? And you know what? This is fine. NTE is a video game, and I'm pretty sure the developer's #1 goal when designing this city is to make Hethereau feel like a real, plausible city. And as someone who knows nothing about city planning and sucks at city skylines, I would say they've succeeded in that area. The lack of any real power connection probably took away actually nothing in the immersion of most people playing this game. And I bet almost nobody even recognized that. Well, except for you and me now. But having the benefit of being a live service game, they could just add a power plant or substation in any new areas. Maybe in the future we'll be looking back on this and say, can you believe that this game didn't have a substation at one point? Now if you'll excuse me, I spent too much time thinking about this and have to go back to actually doing what matters in the game.
That's a good spot.